ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति. Namaskar my dear friends, this is first video on Kena Upanishad. This video starts with the introduction of Kena Upanishad. The Kena Upanishad, so called because it begins with the word Kena, is also known as the Talavakāra Upanishad because it formed the ninth chapter of the Talavakāra Brāhmaṇa of the Samaveda. The preceding 8 chapters of the Brahmana deal with rites, sacrifices, meditation on the deities, and such cognate matters as are necessary for the purification of the aspirant's heart and also for the practice of concentration. The aim of the Kena Upanishad, like that of all other Upanishad, is to teach the knowledge of the oneness of Atma and Brahma. Only through such knowledge can a man become free from delusion and attain bliss and freedom. The Kena Upanishad is divided into 4 chapters. The first two are in the form of a dialogue between a disciple and his spiritual preceptor. The first chapter states that the sense organs and the mind, which are material entities, cannot perform their functions intelligently without the help of Atma or pure consciousness. Atma itself cannot be comprehended by any of them. It remains forever unknown to and unknowable by the senses and the mind. If an unillumined person, we read in the second chapter, boasts that he has known Brahma, he really knows very little of it. But the truly wise man realizes that the infinite and attributeless Brahma can never be an object of knowledge. A finite object may indicate some of the attributes of Brahma but can never reveal its true nature. On the other hand, the analysis of mental states points to the presence of pure consciousness in man. The mind itself is an inert material entity but is transparent and on that account reflects the light of pure consciousness. Through the help of this light, it is able to reveal objects. Therefore, according to the instruction of the Kena Upanishad, Brahma should be meditated upon as the pure intelligence underlying every mental state. Through practice of proper spiritual disciplines, a seeker can realize Brahma in this very life. It need not be only an afresh death experience. The third and fourth chapters describe through a parable the inability of the finite senses to realize the infinite Brahma. In a battle between the gods and the demons, so the story runs. The former won the victory but claimed the glory for themselves, forgetting that they were mere instruments of Brahma, the Supreme Lord. In order to remove this delusion, the Lord appeared as distant as a spirit. The gods of fire and wind, conscious of their power, approached it to learn who it was, but did not succeed. Then Indra, the king of the gods, came forward. The spirit vanished, and there appeared in its place a woman of exquisite beauty who taught Indra that the gods had won the victory through the power and grace of the Supreme Lord alone. He was further told that Brahma was the real operator and that they were mere instruments. As a result of this instruction, Indra and the gods of fire and wind gained preeminence among the gods. The philosophy underlying this story seems to be as follows. The gods stand for the psychic forces that control the sense organs. Indra or I consciousness is their ruler. The demons represent immense evil passions. Now and then the senses are able to overcome a passion and get a sudden glimpse of Atma. Then they proudly feel that they can understand Atma's whole nature. The organ of speech, Agni or fire, thinks it can know the whole of Dharma. Prana, the vital force, Vayu or wind, thinks it alone controls man's activity. They soon realize, however, the futility of their power and beat a retreat. Then the ego or the individual soul, Indra, chastened and humbled, steps forward and the vision of Atma vanishes. There appears before him Grace, Uma, the consort of the Lord, who is the power of Brahma, Shakti, and also the wisdom of the Vedas, Brahmavidya. She destroys the wrong notion of the ego and the senses and ultimately reveals the truth of Brahma. Thus, the aspirant attains the supreme knowledge. It should be noted that one cannot even have a glimpse of the indwelling Atma unless the evil passions are subdued. The Upanishad ends with two kinds of meditation on Dharma and an enumeration of the disciplines for its attainment. Sri Shankaracharya's introduction now begins the ninth chapter in order to introduce the Kena Upanishad, which treats of the Supreme Brahma. Prior to this, all the karmas have been fully explained, and likewise the meditation on the prana, which is the sport of all rituals, and those meditations also which treat of the samans, the auxiliary of karma. Then follow descriptions of the Gayatri Saman and the Vamsa or genealogical list of preceptors and disciples. When all meditations described above are faithfully performed, they tend to purify the mind of the seeker of liberation who is free from desires. On the other hand, he who performs the actions laid down in the Shrutis and Smritis but cherishes desires and is devoid of knowledge follows as a result the southern path and returns to samsara. But those who, following their natural impulses, engage in action forbidden by the scriptures, degrade themselves and are reborn in lower bodies, ranging from beast to unmoving objects. The Kena Upanishad form the ninth chapter of a Brahmana belonging to the Samaveda. The Vedas are in the main divided. The Vedas are in the main divided into two sections, namely the Mantra and the Brahmana, which latter includes most of the Upanishads. According to Anandagiri, the Kena Upanishad belong to the recension of the Talvakaras. That is to say, in the 8 preceding chapters, which deal with various sacrifices and forms of ritualistic worship conducive to the happiness here and happy hereafter of their performers. When these worships are performed without any desire for earthly or celestial gain, they purify the heart. It is the contention of Sankaracharya that karma, ritualistic worship, or humanitarian activities cannot directly bring about liberation but is necessary for the purification of the heart, without which a man cannot cultivate the knowledge of Dharma. A reference to the path followed after death by those who engage in the various duties of life laid down in the scriptures with a view to enjoying happiness here and hereafter. The relative world characterized by birth and death, pain and pleasure, and the other pairs of opposites. It should be remembered that according to Vedanta, Atma or the real soul is free from birth and death, but under the spell of Maya it cherishes desires and assumes bodies high and low for the fulfillment of those desires. Ultimately, all souls attain self-knowledge and liberation. In support of the above, the Vedas say those who perform action under the compulsion of their natural desires do not travel either by the northern or the southern path. They are born as small creatures such as worms and insects, victims of repeated births and deaths. Be born and die. Such is the third path. Another passage in the Vedas says three kinds of living beings, namely those born from worms and from eggs, and those born of earth, such as trees and creepers, unable to travel by either of these paths, attain a miserable end. But he who is pure in heart and free from desires, and who, on account of the good tendencies produced as the result of meritorious work done in this or in a previous birth, cultivates detachment from external and transitory actions, characterized by means and ends, makes inquiries into the nature of the innermost self. This very subject is discussed in the Kena Upanishad, which has derived its name from the first word of the book Kenasitam in the form of questions and answers. The Katha Upanishad, Chapter 2, Part 2, Chapter 1, stanza number 1 states, the self-existent Supreme Lord inflicted an injury upon the sense organs in creating them with outgoing tendencies. Therefore, a man perceives only outer objects with them and not the inner self. But a calm person wishing for immortality beholds the inner self with his eyes closed. The Mundaka Upanishad, Part 1, Chapter 2, stanza number 12 states, let a Brahmin, after having examined all these words which are gained by works, acquire freedom from desires. Nothing that is eternal can be produced by what is not eternal. in order that he may understand that eternal. Let him, fuel in hand, approach a guru who is well versed in the Vedas and always devoted to Brahma. Thus alone, and not otherwise, does a man who is free from desires become qualified to hear about, meditate on, and acquire knowledge of the inmost self. By the knowledge of the identity of the inmost self and Brahma, Ajnana, ignorance, which is the seed of samsara and the cause of desires and of the flow of activity, is entirely destroyed. The Vedas say, how can there be delusion and how can there be grief for him who sees oneness? The knower of Atma overcomes grief. The fetters of the heart are broken. All doubts are resolved, and all works cease to bear fruit when he is beheld who is both high and low. It may be contended that knowledge combined with action can enable one to attain the above mentioned result. The answer is in the negative. The Brahmaṇa Upanishad states that such a combination produces different results. A verse of that Upanishad begins, "Let me have a wife," and then goes on to say, "By begetting a son alone is this world gained, and not by other actions, by karma, the world of the fathers, and by knowledge of the world of the gods." Thus, the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad asserts that the combination of karma and knowledge results in the attainment of the three worlds and not of Atma. The same scripture urges a man to become a wandering sannyasi and gives the following reason. What shall we achieve through children, we who have attained this self, this world? The meaning of the statement is this: what shall we achieve through children, karma, and the combination of karma and knowledge, which are the means to attain the worlds of mortals, of fathers, and of gods, and which do not enable us to secure the world of Atma? We certainly do not desire the three transitory worlds attainable by those means. To us, that world alone is desirable, which is uncaused, birthless, undecaying, and fearless, which does not increase or decrease by karma, and which is eternal. Because it is eternal, that world cannot be attained by any other means but the destruction of ignorance. Therefore, we should bear in mind the knowledge of the non duality of the inmost self and Brahma and renounce all desires. Another reason for what has been said above is that the knowledge of non duality of the inmost self and Brahma is antagonistic to karma. Karma presupposes the knowledge of the distinction between doer and result, but the unitive knowledge of inmost self and Brahma puts an end to the perception of distinctions. Therefore, karma and the knowledge of the inmost self cannot coexist. Furthermore, the knowledge of Brahma depends entirely upon the reality of Brahma itself and not upon the will of knower. Anything that is attained through extraneous means comes to an end Every effect in the causal world is transitory. Knowledge depends on the object of knowledge, but an action depends upon the will of doer. Knowledge, whether true or false, must arise when a sense organ comes in contact with an object. The knower cannot avoid it, but the doer may engage in an action or desist from it or act in any other way he likes. Therefore, an action is dependent upon the will of the doer. When by means of proper disciplines an aspirant becomes ready, the knowledge of Brahma must shine forth within him. He has no option of knowing or not knowing Brahma or of knowing it differently. So, the scriptural injunctions regarding actions cannot produce the knowledge of Brahma. There is no scope for karma and with regard to Brahma, which admits of no distinction. Therefore, the enquiry into Brahma as being connected with the inmost self by a person who has renounced all visible and invisible rewards achievable by external means is introduced in the Kena Upanishad, beginning with Kenesitam, etc. The subject matter is extremely subtle, hence its elucidation in the form of a dialogue between a disciple and his preceptor for the purpose of its easy understanding. The dialogue also clearly points out that the knowledge of Brahma cannot be attained by means of mere logical discussion. The Vedas say this knowledge cannot be attained by reasoning. He who has studied under a preceptor knows the knowledge that is obtained from a teacher becomes fruitful. The Bhagavad Gita says, learn it by prostration before a teacher. Therefore, it can be imagined that someone who had not found refuge anywhere except in the knowledge of the inmost self and who desired what was fearless, eternal, all good and immutable, duly approached a teacher who was firmly established in Brahma and asked him the question with which the Kena Upanishad begins. So this video is completed. Next video number 2 on Kena Upanishad will start with invocation. Thank you. Namaskar, my dear friends. Namaskar.